Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deep Edge Podcast. I'm your host, Ray Moda, and today we're going to be zoning into the fast moving fault line where AI innovation meets enterprise risk. And we're going to be diving deep into a recent report that Cisco did related to the state of AI security. And there's some really interesting findings in there. Some of the key takeaways: 72% of organizations have already woven in AI into production, which is amazing, and it's good to see that. But yet the concern is that only 13% say they're truly ready to secure it. And that staggering preparedness in this gap is kind of concerning because it provides an opportunities for adversaries to be eager to exploit this opportunity. So in this area, we're going to go deep into some things related to the supply chain management of Sleepy Pickle and the impacts that it can compromise, some of the discussions relating to policies. And we're very fortunate enough to unpack some of these findings. Joining us from Cisco is Anand Raghavan, who's Vice President of Products for AI. And Anand's going to go deep into some of the research and some real world breaches that are driving this potential concerns that CISOs and data scientists team need to be very aware of and need to think about how they secure the AI traffic while still maintaining a level of innovation. So let's get this started. Hey Anand, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Thanks, Ray. Busy times, a lot of fun stuff happening in AI at Cisco.
No, this is great. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on. I know how busy you are and you got a lot of good things going on. Maybe before we get started, do you mind talking about what your current role at Cisco is and what keeps you busy these days?
Yeah, so I'm a VP of products for AI in the AI software and platforms group at Cisco. And we get to do some really fun projects where we are bringing new AI and Gen AI powered software experiences across our portfolio of products, including assistants, including securing AI, and a few other products that are in the works.
Excellent. Now, I read the report, the Cisco 2025 State of the AI Security Report, and it was very interesting, enlightening, and some good surprises in there. Now, for our listeners that haven't had a chance to read it, and hopefully when we distribute this, we'll include a link to the report from the distribution side of it. But could you give some high level and some highlight takeaways from the report?
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal was to educate the market on a few different fronts. So we started a series a couple of years back, which is the AI Readiness Index survey. So that was surveying the market to try to understand how ready is the market to adopt AI. This is a continuation of that philosophy and that approach. Here, what we are trying to do is to dial in on AI security and give people a better understanding of, like, there's news that comes out every day, every week in AI. If you just take a step back, what are the trends that we are seeing in industry? From a policy perspective, from an attacks perspective, from employees and how employees see AI perspective, and what are some of the things that organizations need to worry about. So that was the focus of the report. And there's a few different interesting things in there. Like, for example, we talk about the number of different AI-related bills that have been enacted across the country. I think there's 113 that were enacted into law. 2024, for example, policy was a big priority for AI. In 2025, innovation is a big priority. So across the country, we are trying to foster innovation and push for that more. On the other hand, from a threat intelligence perspective, there's a whole new set of threat vectors from either jailbreaking or prompt injection attacks and all of that. And we have showcased and highlighted a few of those as well, including some of the efforts done by our own team, our AI research team, and published some of that as part of the report.
No, this is great. I mean, I think because it's interesting because that's one of the concerns that I've had. We've seen a lot of good benefits and stuff with AI, but there's been some cases where people just aren't thinking of security and the life cycle of that. Now, when we think of what we call systemic risk, right? We're seeing, as you mentioned, a lot of success in AI, and we're seeing it across a lot of verticals from hospitals, banks, and public sectors. I've even seen that in some parts of like power grid. But things are changing, right? Is if we look at some of these AI systems, if they get hacked, right? Could we see a domino effect of outages and how do we address different type of cyber attack on how we do things today. Any color you could provide on that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you just break that down one level deeper, right? There is software, there's automation, and then there is AI, right? So automation inherently poses risks. As you automate more things and there is less human oversight, you have to worry about what went into the automation script as part of software, right? So that has been there for a while. That risk surface has been there for a while, and people have had different ways to mitigate that in terms of building SBOMs to make sure that they understand the software supply chain, where the software came from, securing software in terms of having different layers of security, either it's identity or access into those systems, all of that. So in that sense, that aspect of our vulnerability from an attack surface perspective is not new. What AI has introduced, and we are going to see a lot more of that this year onwards, is around agents and autonomous agents in particular, right? So what are the capabilities you are providing agents? What data sources do they have access to? What decisions can they make independently? And what are the decisions that they need a human in the loop to actually verify and authenticate, right? So those are some of the key challenges. So that's one part of the spectrum. What is the new set of attack surface that comes into play? The second one is your new areas of exposure that are very different from the software stack. So there is models, and models as a non-deterministic part of a software stack is very confusing to people, and rightfully so. Models can be non-deterministic in ways that we do not know. Like you could poison the data, you could poison the pickle file that you download the model with. For particular kinds of data, the model could behave differently and could get a different response than normal, right? So now, in addition to that, the latest development that we're seeing with MCP servers and tool use, now people are looking at new kinds of attacks called line jumping and tool poisoning, where as part of the tool instruction set, the agent is being told to do things that it should not be doing, right? So those are new classes of attack vectors that make you more vulnerable. I don't think it makes it easier to scale. The scale comes because of a different reason. Like, for example, if you think back to email-based attacks, right? Before Gen AI, if I had to do an email-based attack, I had to sit and write a lot of emails and then write an automation script that'll put in hi Ray or hi Anand. And I had to insert first name, last name, and we've all gotten some of those mails where it says hi first name because somebody forgot an automation script, right? The challenge there was sometimes if these people are not native speakers of English, the language is different. And we know, hey, Ray doesn't send emails like that. This doesn't sound like Ray, right? What Gen AI has been instrumental in letting hackers accomplish is to craft pitch perfect English emails, where if they're sending an email to someone in English, it looks really good, right? So that has made it harder to detect on the text front, right? If you look at deepfakes in audio and video, so the cost of creating these attacks at scale has come down drastically. So in that sense, the volume of attacks is going to go up. I don't think that's yet fundamentally shifted how resilient we are to it or how it can bring something across the system down all at once, right? I don't think it has fundamentally shifted yet, but the agentic world poses the first real threat on that front.
Yeah, no, this is good. There's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you mentioned pickles and stuff like this. One of the things that I think I want to go a little bit deeper and peel the onion on is related to what I call this open source trade-off, right? If we look at open source models, it lets teams move fast in a way, but attacks, like you mentioned, like Sleepy Pickle, right, show some of the downside, right? But do we need something like some safety seals, a certification for this AI supply chain at all?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That's a lot of organizations, including our own, we have been talking about that pretty actively. Just like there is SBOM validation, verification of the software supply chain, AI supply chain is something that all of us need to think about in a few different ways. One is what is the data that goes into building these models? Our researchers actually did some model testing where they poisoned just 0.1% of the data that went into training a model. And that was enough, just 0.1% to direct the model towards undesirable outcomes, right? So that's one part of that. The second part of that is what Sleepy Pickle did, which is basically in the packaging of the model itself. In the pickle file, can you insert malicious code that when you deserialize, it actually does instructions that are harmful, right? And it makes it even more difficult to enforce it because in a very distributed manner. It's in Hugging Face, it's in some other model marketplace environments, and it can get downloaded by a lot of people before it gets shut down by the model hosting provider, right? So something like VeriSign for sites. There is a need of the hour to have some way to certify a model file to say, okay, this has been validated and verified. And as an ecosystem, we need to get there. Some of the things that we have been investing is as part of our AI defense portfolio, we do have supply chain protection as well. And we are working with the model developer ecosystem to actually insert model cards where we can give a certain vulnerability score to these models, safety score to these models, so that people know before they download something what that looks like. So a lot of initiatives like that, including the ones from Cisco that are happening. Also, standards bodies are actively looking at this as well. Cisco is part of the NIST adversarial machine learning report that just was put out. So the adversarial machine learning framework actually has a section on supply chain vulnerabilities and what are the things that companies should worry about. In fact, out of the five authors, two were Cisco researchers that actively contributed to that. So we have been actively looking at the space.
No, this is great. Now, I mean, talking about your research, right? If we look at a reality check on some of the jailbreaks, one of the things they found, which was interesting, I had to read a few times, was fully automated jailbreaks that can crack into some of these models very quickly and very efficiently. Does that mean alignment isn't enough? And what else should builders be doing? I mean, in that situation.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the very counterintuitive discoveries that Cisco researchers did about a year ago, slightly more than a year ago, is that fine-tuning fundamentally destroys alignment, right? So previously, what we had discussed, I know we'll talk about this deeper soon as well. Previously,
Mhm.
what was discussed in the market is that look, model providers can actually take care of any kind of guardrail related questions that you might ask. So if I go to a GPT model from OpenAI, or if I download Llama and use Llama, and I ask it a question that I'm not supposed to be asking, the model providers will have enough alignment in place to make sure that the model actually follows that, right? What we have discovered is that once you take this and once you start playing around with the model for your own use, it actually breaks down that construct, right? But fundamentally, alignment is a problem that's very different from what the core expertise of a model builder should be, right? A model builder should focus on factuality, accuracy, not hallucinating, groundedness, all of that as part of a bias, as part of their core areas of expertise, right? One of the challenges we'll see, in fact, there was this really interesting paper from Caltech about a year back, which said this in the context of control theory. Just like you are able to uh, control a physical device and make it move in a direction. We have seen these physical jailbreak attempts of somebody hacking into a car and getting the car to go in a particular direction by steering the algorithm in a particular direction. They were looking at models and model steerability from that perspective. Can you actually jailbreak a model to make it do things that are undesirable, right? So alignment is a very complex topic that way. It is not like all it takes is in the security world, we always say, right? It doesn't matter if you got it right 10,000 times. All it takes is one time to get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And that is not the core area of focus for model builders. And that's always the dichotomy. Do I focus on making my model provide really accurate answers? Or do I focus on securing the model to make sure that security and jail protection against jailbreaks is taken care of?
Yeah, no, that's this is excellent because I hope they don't. I'm one of those that has the fully automated driving, and I use it late at night if I'm a little tired. So we need to be careful with that. Now, you mentioned fine tuning, right?
Yeah.
And what is the balance when we look at fine tuning versus vulnerability? And one of the things that your report touches on, right, is industry specific fine tuning can actually make models easier to break, right? That to me was a jaw dropper, right?
Yeah.
How should companies weigh the benefits and the risk, and how do they safeguard this, any way that they can help?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a couple of things to unpack there. One is the research was, like you said, jaw-dropping. Took me a little bit to kind of read that and understand
Right.
exactly what it was trying to say. What we discovered was a couple of things. One is a fine-tuned variant of a model is almost 3 times more susceptible to jailbreak. And the other was it's almost 22 times
Wow.
more likely to
Wow.
produce a harmful response than the original, right? So it's substantially worse. And there's a few reasons to that, because when the model is being trained, it's being trained with a certain set of alignment goals. And when you fine tune that with additional data, that fundamentally breaks that premise inside of the model, right? And that points to a broad separation of concerns between building software and building guardrails, or building models and building guardrails, right? So if you focus on getting a model and doing the best that you want to do with fine tuning with your own data, but then make sure that you have separate guardrails in place to protect those models, that allows you to develop and offer products to your customers faster while securing the models when they are in production, right? So for almost all practical scenarios that a big company wants to build cloud applications, the model needs to be fine-tuned with your own data, with your own customer data, or your own synthetic data that you've generated for your use cases, right? So that's one part of the problem. The other interesting development we are seeing in the market is this increasing growth of the context window inside of models. We started with 4K tokens to now 10 million tokens in Llama 4. Right? So, I mean, the joke I always make is I'm a good large language model with a large context window. I mean, give me a lot of information, I can summarize it really well. Models are getting there like humans, right? Models, not just are they really large parameter models, their context window is also large. So if you wanted to summarize, I mean, the classic example I do is I was just talking to business school students over the weekend. You have a case study that you have to write a summary for, and that's due tomorrow, and you have 10 different PDF files that you have to read, which are all really long. You cannot dump all of that in a context window. And you can tell the model, hey, summarize this for me, and how should I think about this, right? And can really give you a good analysis of that, right? So what that means is that for some of the use cases you have inside of the enterprise, you may not need a fine-tuned model anymore. You could put the data into the context as much as you want, as much as it fills the context, and it will give you the desired output, right? So you can also now balance between what are the scenarios where I want to fine tune models versus where I just want to drop it in the context window and make sure the model gets the data it needs.
Yeah, no, very powerful there, very powerful. Now, in the beginning, part of it, when you're talking about some of the takeaways, you talked about, some of the policies and bills, right? I call it policy whiplash, right? I think it stated something that over 700 AI related bills are popping up across the US. Just in the US alone, I can't even imagine what that number is globally. But how do global companies stay compliant, without slowing down innovation? Are we in a situation where regulatory whiplash is a real threat to innovation?
Yeah, there's been really interesting talking to CISOs about regulation, and specifically about AI regulation in general, right? And one of the CISOs made a really interesting analogy to me. He said, Anand, do you know why cars have brakes? I said, why? He said, well, it's so cars can go faster, right?
Ah,
So you know what are the environments in which you can operate, and then you can execute faster based on that, right? So I see a lot of AI regulation in that manner, right? So between the OWASP LLM 10, MITRE Atlas, and the NIST risk management framework, it gives a really good set of constructs that practitioners can abide by, that developers that are building these products can abide by, and that CISOs and governance risk and compliance team can actually inspect and investigate, right? And to the extent that all of these laws kind of converge around these in a broad sense, it is fairly straightforward to abide by them, right? Where the challenges happen are if they start diverging into a lot of different ways, and you have to now figure out if complying with one means you're not fully compliant with another one. And I think that's where, as an industry and as regulators, we need to kind of focus on. Are these all driving towards a common set of customer outcomes where the customer is safe and secure when they're using AI, and their data is protected so that they can get a better experience without worrying about these concerns, right? That's the underlying philosophy. And to that end, there is definitely a lot of overlapping uh, guidelines across all of these, right? Whether you look at not just within the US, you look at the EU AI Act, you look at the recent guidelines that have been put out in Singapore or Japan or other parts of the world, there is a common converging set of needs across these categories, right? So that's one big part of this. The second part of this, as a practitioner, how do I show proof that I'm complying to all of these things, right? And that's where, if I am implementing products in my environment, to the extent that products can automatically show me, hey, by the way, if you have this in place, you're automatically compliant to these standards and these regulations. And that's a direction in which, as vendors that are building products in this area, that we are focused on. how do we make it easier for CISOs and for GRC teams to actually show that they are actually compliant to all of these, that if they have this in place, this is their score from a compliance perspective, right? So that's how we are seeing it. Ultimately, it's driven by customers and what value we bring to customers. And I think regulation, as long as it is aligned with that, is good.
Yeah, I'm so going to use that car in the brake example. Don't worry, I'll give you credit because I think it's a brilliant way to explain that whiplash discussion there. It's just a good example. Now, maybe we can close with, right? It's from a takeaway perspective. Could you provide maybe our audience two or three steps that you would recommend that any enterprise or even service provider should be looking into or locking down when they're considering AI today?
Yeah. So a lot of organizations are going through this challenge, right? And primarily, there is a couple of stakeholders you should think about, right? One is your employees. If you ask any employee in a company that is driven by the mission of the company, they're like, yes, I want to adopt Gen AI to do better at my job, to make sure I'm able to bring better products faster, to do my job better within my organization, right? So that anybody you talk to, that's a clear wish that they have, right? So there's a few things in there. One is just like we did security awareness training to tell people not to click on those phishing links.
Mhm.
And it works in many organizations, sometimes it doesn't. Um, the time is right to start doing AI awareness training, right? To let the employees know what is good, what is not good, so that they can watch out for things like deep fakes, things like voice and video deep fakes, right? So that's one part of it. How do you educate the employees on how to use AI from a security perspective, right? The second part of that is if I am part of the CIO organization, I'm part of the CISO organization, how do I get visibility into what my employees are doing with AI? What kind of models are they accessing out on the internet in third-party services, right? Are they going to ChatGPT and copying code? Are they downloading code from ChatGPT? Are they downloading models from Hugging Face, right? So you need, just like shadow IT was a problem 10, 15 years back, shadow AI is a here and now problem. It is a solvable problem, but it's a here and now problem. And to the extent that you can have a clear set of guidelines around this that employees are aware of, and you can empower them to use these products. I don't think it's a question of should they be allowed to use it. I think that's already that ship has sailed. For example, within Cisco, we have what we call Bridge IT, Bridget, as we call
Mhm.
it, which is a ChatGPT wrapper with our own set of guardrails using AI defense, so that we know that employees can access ChatGPT, our own instance of it, in a safe and secure manner, right? So how do you empower your employees to actually adopt Gen AI quicker, right? So that's one set of concerns around employee use of AI. The other part of it is, as you think about bringing better experiences to your customers, what are the things you worry about, right? You're building all of these applications with Gen AI built in. Starts with visibility. Do you know what are the applications? What are the models that your employees are using? What are the clouds in which these are being deployed, right? Second is validation. Just like we have a really good software development lifecycle from a validation of software before it goes into production, do you have a similar set of validation steps for models before you take them to production, right? Um, the third part of that is the runtime protection part of it. When these models are being deployed, if I have built an airline chatbot that the passengers can chat with to change their flights and things like that, am I making sure that when they send in a request, it has the right kinds of safety, security, and privacy guardrails in place so my customers can use my chatbot in a safe and secure manner while protecting my chatbot from any attempts by hackers to compromise it, right? So that's another set of things to worry about. Another important part of this is to actually understand, going back to where I started from an AI readiness perspective.
Right.
As I talk to a lot of customers, they're on different parts of the spectrum when it comes to AI readiness. And one of the significant discussions happening today is around sovereign AI, sovereign data centers. I would like to keep my data in my own private VPC or in my own data center, right? So that becomes an important part of the equation. Maybe you want to start testing this in public clouds using commercially available models off the box. But then if you're in a highly regulated space like finance, or you're in a very IP heavy environment like biotech or pharma or something like that, you might want to start moving this more in a private environment where your data runs in your own data centers, right? So that's
Right.
another consideration to think about. But it's definitely an evolving landscape, and uh, companies that are looking at this should look at vendors both from a consultative approach and a product capability approach. And one of the things that I always talk about, so uh, prior to coming here, I've always been in startups, and startups were the underdog, and that's how you kind of pitch against the man and say, hey, by the way, we can do better and faster. AI at some level is slowly changing that assumption because to become AI first, you need to be data first.
Right.
And you need to have large volumes of data and a larger platform to build your AI capabilities on to provide a better set of experiences to the customer. And in that sense, as customers look at this landscape, I think having a platform approach to how they look at it, something that can support them through the entire life cycle where the models learn from the visibility side of the house all the way to the runtime protection side of the house, is AI that actually learns and builds better versus point solutions that might address just specific parts of the model development lifecycle.
Yeah, no, this is good. I mean, I think some of the key points, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think the key parts of it is so fundamentals of good cybersecurity still apply even for AI, right? And we need to think about security at every stage of the AI life cycle from where we get the data, right? From who we allow to see and touch the data, from how these models and how we're using them, right? So I think fundamentals of basic cybersecurity still apply from this. Anand, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I know how busy you are. I appreciate you coming on to our audience, and hopefully you can join us again as you make more progress in the future.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back and I've listened to a couple of episodes. I'm looking forward to listening to a lot more. And thanks so much, Ray, for the opportunity.
Excellent. With Anand, I'm Ray Moda. Thanks for joining this episode.